one.
Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, and that's Sanford Hess, and this is Real Reviews Home Edition, the show where we watch movies from our homes. This week, we're going to be talking about two newer films that came out this year. One is going to be Black Bear, and the other is going to be An American Pickle. I'll tell you that straight up, I have interesting opinions on both of these films, but I'm going to let Sanford lead off with the plot of Black Bear. Sanford?
All right. Well, Black Bear starts off as we arrive. We meet Allison, played by Aubrey Plaza, and we learn that Allison is a film director who stars in her own movies, and she has come to a rather secluded house which a couple lives in, and then they sort of Airbnb out the other room. And she's there to write her next film. So we're introduced to this couple, and really, the movie starts off with the dynamics among this couple who is Gabe and Blair. Blair is a woman and Gabe is a guy. Now, Blair is pregnant with Gabe's child. They're not married, but they live together in this sort of cabin, and we learn their backstory. And Allison's there, and sort of there's a little bit of a triangle going on, and the movie progresses along with the dynamic relationship between these three people for about the first third of the movie. Now, there is at that point a rather abrupt shift. And in probably the most interesting part of the movie, we get a sort of new intertitle, and the movie starts over with the same three actors, but in different roles. And so now, instead of Aubrey Plaza's character being a director who was trying to write a movie while she was at this lake house, now she is married to the guy Gabe. He is a director filming a movie in this house. And Blair, the woman who was pregnant in the first part, is not pregnant. She is another actress in the film. So the sort of remainder of the film stays with this second scenario with the same actors. And as this part of the movie goes on, we learn that Gabe and Allison, the director and the star of this film, are in a relationship where it's a little bit vague about what their relationship is, but he is a director and he's using the other actress in a love triangle, but not actually in a love triangle, he's doing it to engage Allison and to draw her into a bigger performance. Now, in the second part of the movie, instead of just being the three characters, there's a whole bunch of other people around them who are the crew of the film who are filming everything going on. So there's more interplay of people and there's more sort of hijinks and humor. But the film really still stays on these three crucial characters. And through that second half of the film, we watch as the final sort of culmination scene is coming up, and Allison gets really drunk and seems to just not at all be ready for the scene. But it all kind of comes together in a final denouement of emotions. The film wraps, and then in the final part, we're treated to a recreation of the first shot of the movie, which had Aubrey Plaza sitting on a dock looking out of the water, except now we see the cameras filming her and we see the lighting, and it's introduced us into the film behind the film. Now, I did not do justice to describing this movie, Chike. Would you agree with that?
No offense, but no. Um, Trying to be as polite about that as possible. Um, for our audience who may have lost themselves halfway through that summary, where Sanford admirably tried to give a summation of what happened, what I really need to say is the beginning part of the story that is being described by Sanford is re-engaged throughout the second half of the story, uh, except for this time around, instead of that scene playing out with those actors acting out the parts they were before, all the roles are switched. Allison is now not the stranger. She's the wife of the actual director, who ends up being Gabe. And then Blair is just an actress who, he's flirting with to get Allison's attention so that she, like Sanford said, can give a bigger, more emotive performance because she's been checked out the entire production. Aubrey Plaza gives the performance of her career in this movie. Mostly because she doesn't depend on what people know her for. People know her a lot for sarcastic, witty comments and just not giving a crap about anybody. While that is present here, there's a vulnerability to it and a vulnerability to Allison as a character that I've not seen before in Aubrey Plaza as a performer.
Now, I
You
want to
feel
say this.
bad for her.
I agree with you that she gives the most emotional performance I've ever seen her in, and we saw her in something just last week in Happiest Season. Except the way I described it in my notes about this movie is scene chewing. I mean, she was over emoting, overacting in these scenes, and
I don't disagree with that, but it worked for me.
really, all right, it
It
didn't
worked
work
for
for
me
me.
because, like, the snarkiness that she's used to having was present in the first half of the movie.
Yes,
But that all shifted when we got to the second half of the movie, and you saw somebody who was completely broken. And watching that brokenness play out in front of, like you said, way more people than the first half of the film had was amazing to watch.
really. See,
For me, yeah, because you're watching a car crash that starts slow when you're like, wait, well, why did everything change? What's going on? To an evolution of just boiling tension that apparently had been there the entire shoot. We just didn't see it all. We saw the culmination of it.
which no, I mean that for sure. But I just, I mean, her role in the first half, it's almost like she's emotionally dead in the first, I mean, first half, first third, whatever, the first chunk of the movie. It's like she's emotionally dead, and she kind of says as much to them that she can't feel, she doesn't have, doesn't have these things in her. Then the second one, it's almost like she's, I mean, she's just gone too far the opposite extreme from my perspective. I mean, I agree with
I
you.
mean,
This
I
it's quite a
don't disagree
performance.
that it's a lot. I don't
Yeah.
disagree that it's a lot. But because she does that sarcastic, I don't give a crap about the world thing so often, to see this person, this character be as broken and bent and corrupted as she was, made the film all the more interesting and made me go, where is this going to go?
Well, there
How,
definitely was a lot of where is this going to go?
and how is she going to handle her life after this?
Yeah. Well, and and I'm going to say that I was less impressed by Aubrey Plaza's performance and more impressed by the other two people. In the first part of the movie, it was Blair who I was really impressed by because I just kind of liked her spunky character.
I
And
agree.
and in the second part of the movie, I was more impressed by Gabe as the filmmaker slash boyfriend, husband, whatever he was to Aubrey Plaza.
Ooh, I don't agree there because I found him to be meticulously abusive in a way that I found completely off-putting.
He was he that's right. No, he was playing mind games with Allison, except that was seemed to be like the basis of the relationship. It's almost, I mean, there was a lot underpinning this relationship that wasn't explained or explored. I mean, it's like he was manipulating her. He was taking advantage of her, but it's like he knew that she needed that as an actress, which okay, now I got to break into my criticism of the writer director here, Lawrence Michael Levine. This movie is too insider by half. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who live in Hollywood who watched this movie and really appreciated the inside jokes about filmmaking and the little, oh wow, that's a director doing it, whatever. But I got to say, from watching this movie from Illinois, that stuff went pretty much right over my head, and it was too cute by half. That's my criticism in terms of the whole movie within a movie about the movie making on a film set.
I mean, I paid less attention to that because I was so focused on the destruction happening around that whole environment. I mean, I know that it takes a lot of work for a film crew to get anything done. I've been in theater productions where the same thing takes place and people are hard to deal with. Having said that, I was more focused on who's gonna have the worst emotional breakdown and what's gonna happen after they do. Are they gonna get support? Are they gonna be coddled? Where's the payoff for all this damage that's occurring in this 90-minute or 110-minute film? And the weird part is, spoiler alert, audiences, there really was no payoff. The payoff was that those two things, the thing that she was writing in part one and what we experienced in part two, seemed to just be literally story ideas from the main character's perspective.
Right. But see, and that gets to one of my ultimate criticisms of this film. And again, maybe I just didn't grasp it, but what is this movie about? I mean, what to me, the whole, even the name Black Bear and the fact that there are sort of two scenes where there's a bear that sort of tears up the garbage or something like that, or she hears something rustling in the bushes. At the end of the movie, I was left grasping for what's the point here? What are we trying to tell besides just two short stories?
Okay, I'm gonna put on my critic's hat here.
Yes, I love it when you do that.
Go. Black Bear is a culmination of ideas about who the character of Allison is and how her world has been shaped by decisions that either she made or that she was involved in. And those are two scenarios in her life where she both was the pacifist and the chaos.
Wow.
That's as best as I can do.
All right. Well, so let's tie up our discussion with Black Bear with the most critical question of all. So it is. I did a little research on the theatrical release aspect. So this movie went to Sundance at the beginning of 2020. It was
Mm-hmm.
picked up for distribution. They didn't release it until December. So it's a new release at home. It is playing in theaters somewhere. There's theaters open. Let's see. It was on Netflix, wasn't? Is that how we watched it?
I watched it just straight up on demand.
Okay. So, let's, for our viewers at home, because the most important thing we can do here is steer them in the right direction. Is this worth it? Is this worth on demand prices?
I personally love it, but I would not recommend it because I think it would confuse way too many people.
Yeah, I I think I was one of those people who was confused. I can appreciate parts of this movie. I appreciated some of the scenes and the acting, but as a whole, this movie didn't really stick together for me. And I would, the even the intertitles kind of annoyed me with this. It reminded me of, Isle of Dogs or, some other kind of twee movie. It was just a little too cute several times. And ultimately, in the end, I was just kind of left dissatisfied with this thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Um, so my job now is to talk about one pickle that we just dealt with and go into another pickle that we're now dealing with, and that's an American pickle. Um, Basically starring Seth Rogen as a man and with the last name Greenbaum, Herschel Greenbaum, uh, and he's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, strap yourselves in for this. Herschel Greenbaum is a poor European man in the early 1900s. Can we say that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he has no prospects because he's a ditch digger. At some point, he sees a beautiful woman named Sarah, and he says, "Oh, well, I'm going to dig double the ditches to be able to give her the food so she doesn't have to be starved in poverty." And from that, a friendship grows, and from that, a relationship grows, and the two get married. And he gets a job killing rats at a pickle factory. And then, guys, this is the best part of the entire movie, I think. The the rats have an uprising, and they become very venomous, and they're about to all attack him at once. And because he's on a high scaffolding, when he's discovering all these rats, he falls into the pickle brine, and at that point, magically, the factory is condemned, and 100 years passes, and until a drone hits the lid where the pickles in the pickle brine were, he wakes up from 100-year coma, essentially. Okay, first of all, before I get to the rest of this movie, how did he not drown in the pickle brine? How?
See, they gave a scientific explanation. That was probably my favorite scene in the movie when the guy was like, and then all the journalists are there to meet him, and he's being, and they give the scientific explanation, and everybody goes, "Oh, okay."
Yeah,
So
we don't
yeah, that
even
was
hear
the
what that is
scientific
right away.
explanation. Yes.
So now living in the new world, Herschel realizes he has a descendant named Ben. It's his great grandson. And his great grandson's an app developer who is trying to get his app off the ground. Meanwhile, Herschel's trying to, you know, gather pieces of his past because he's realized his wife has died and he wants to go to the place where she's buried, which happens to be next to a giant billboard. And Herschel's upset because he thinks the Gestapo put it there. They
The
didn't.
Cossacks.
The Cossacks.
Cossacks.
The
Yes.
Cossacks. Um, and so he fights them and gets both his great grandson and himself imprisoned. Um, from that, this movie goes from okay, I feel for Mr. Herschel Greenbaum to Herschel Greenbaum is now the only person I care about in this movie because what happens is Ben, as a result of getting uh, the arrest upon himself for being part of the Cossacks fight, his app developer financial backer discontinues the idea of paying him for his app that he's created, resulting in him not being able to make money. Meanwhile, Herschel says he loves pickles and wants to make pickles and brine, but he has no money to really make pickles and brine, so he steals it from a restaurant's dirty food bin and begins selling them at $4 a pop and making a nice little chunk of change. Of course, Ben is envious and jealous of his success, so he spends the entire movie basically spoiling every good thing that Herschel builds for himself, culminating in Herschel getting pretty much what I think is the ultimate payback, and getting been deported back to his original home country. That's all I'm going to say for that. I need to put my critic hat on again. As an actor, I don't usually like Seth Rogen. Um, I hate Ben Greenbaum in this film, but I love Herschel Greenbaum in this film. Uh, there's a bunch of ways that Rogen manages to emote. There's a value system and a value set with Herschel surrounding family, success, valuing what you have. That's not present in 2020 Ben. I found someone of my own generation absolutely despicable, not because he was in it for himself, but because his whole intent was to cause harm. He learned nothing by causing misery to his literal ancestor. His literal ancestor. Um, and for me, the value in it teaches you the value of family, the value of hard work, the value of togetherness. And Herschel achieves that togetherness by learning basic concepts like hiring interns and showing them the proper way to work with things. The only thing that really damages Herschel overall is his opinions on daily life because his opinions are from 100 years ago and he's not fully in tune with that. And Ben takes advantage of that multiple times throughout the film. Do I like this movie? Not as much as I like Herschel Greenbaum, but I think it's a good movie for people to see. Having said that, what are your opinions of An American Pickle, Sanford?
Well, I kind of like the Black Bear was a bit of an insider movie. I feel like this movie was a bit of an insider movie too. It is, it is set in Brooklyn in our modern time. There's a lot of jokes about artisanal pickles that are disgusting, but people eat them because they're so natural. They have no benzoates, they have no preservatives, but they're in a dirty jar of rainwater.
Oh God,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, this movie to me is, I see it as satire. I mean, what they're satirizing is this 21st century attitude of Ben Greenbaum, who doesn't have the skills that Herschel does. He doesn't have the drive to succeed. He doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the fortitude. He doesn't have the values like you talked about. And, the satire is, look at what it's like to compare somebody from 100 years ago and what would they think of us now. And there's a little bit of self-loathing. There's a lot of bit of self-loathing in the Ben Greenbaum character that is us in this modern age looking at ourselves and saying, "Oh my God, we're so weak." We have seltzer water at the touch of a button. But we wouldn't be able to do anything if we were dropped off in a land where we didn't speak the language like he is at the end. So, I see this as a satire, and it's really poking fun of ourselves. Now, I'm going to agree with you though that it wasn't as much fun as it could have been. I liked actually the very beginning of the movie. The first 5 or 10 minutes I thought were the best part, and they were the funniest part. I mean, the scenes where he was in the old country, and I really wish, as short a running time as this movie was, I wish they had stuffed more of that comedy in the beginning. I would like to see more of the relationship between Herschel and Sarah, which I thought was really good. I would have liked to see more about like how they actually got to America, which they sort of skipped past. So, to me, this movie is a little bit of a lost. It didn't quite achieve to what it could have been. Now, I do want to say there's one other aspect of this movie that I found, resonated with me, and I will say that it's very cultural. So this movie is very Jewish, and not in a Woody Allen sense of Jewish, but it is about Jewish culture and values, and it's also the self-loathing side of American Jews who don't feel like they're quite as strong as their forebears were. But it's also ultimately in the movie, it's about Ben being brought back to his roots. And this is something where, unfortunately, the movie doesn't really explain this very well. But because I'm Jewish, I was able to tie into it. There's several scenes where Herschel wants Ben to pray with him over the deaths of their family. And
absolutely, yeah.
And this is and in that sort of, there's a final scene where they're both saying the prayer with all those guys in the room. They don't really explain what's going on, but if you're Jewish, you sort of recognize that it's a very important moment for somebody to say this prayer for somebody who's recently died. They do need 10 people for it to count. So he is able to be that 10th person. And it's really a very powerful moment for Ben. But because the movie is sort of subtle about what's going on there, I feel bad because I feel like that moment is going to wash right over a lot of people.
I agree.
It's really a very strong moment in the film, but because it's an inside baseball kind of thing, I don't feel that people will really glom onto that as much as they should. So I guess that's my way of explaining to a certain extent why the ending of the movie is really actually much more powerful and emotional than you'd expect from a Seth Rogen movie. But ultimately, like you, I was kind of disappointed with where this movie went. It was funny at times. It was a little bit of a screwball comedy at times. And it was a dark comedy at times, because like you said, I mean, after a certain point in the movie, Ben's mission, it seems, is to, derail his great-grandfather's success. And, I mean, that leads to some funny scenes, but ultimately that part of the film, and I want to give some credit as well to the writers, because to me this movie sort of had a good narrative arc. And the middle of the movie, the two-third point of the movie, made sense in the context of where the film ended up. And there
Mhm.
was a good resolution to the film, I thought. So I really want to give some credit on that. Too many movies, especially too many comedies, tend to kind of peter out and end weakly. But I felt like this movie actually pulled it together fairly well.
I feel like this same premise would work better as a drama. You wouldn't be able to explain the pickle brining thing where he wakes up after 100 years, but you could you could really go hard on the traditionalism
Yeah,
and contrast that well with a person from 2020, and show flashbacks with Ben and his parents. Show
right.
a flashback or two with Sarah missing Herschel, and really sell those family values and make it a really powerful story about immigration and change and moving forward in life, and that you're the only one that can really hold yourself back, which is what Ben was doing the entire movie, not just for Herschel but for himself.
That was an awesome summary. So, final question, of course. This one's on HBO Max. You would need to subscribe to HBO Max to watch it because this is the only venue it's on. Is it worth your time and money?
I passively recommend it because it tried something new, even if it didn't fully succeed.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go a little strong in the recommendation, particularly if you're Jewish and have some sort of tie to this movie, but also because of Seth Rogen two-way performance, which I did read. He actually performed all the scenes after having grown out his hair and beard, and then cut his beard, cut his hair, turned around, and filmed the rest of the scenes from the other direction. So for nothing else, it's a technical achievement that I think that they pull that off exceptionally well.
They did.
Yeah.
They definitely did. All right, so you won't see us again until I believe after the new year.
Probably not.
And at that time, we'll be reviewing Wonder Woman 1984 and Wonder Woman, because I haven't seen the Wonder Woman from, what is it, 2018, 2017.
Can't wait for that double feature. That sounds great.
Until then, we'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.